All right, Douglas Murray destroys cultural Marxism. This cultural Marxism thing, this is the postmodern neo-Marxism, but we call it cultural Marxism. Let's see what he has to say.
Yeah, there's a pattern in all of this. As I say in that chapter, you can see the intellectual underpinnings, and they come from this idea that if it's a Marxist idea, but it's just transferred to the modern era, where instead of talking about society in class structures, you talk about it in minority interest group structures, and you lump people like this.
So different things. So I'm not sure I'm accepting this characterization of whatever the new ideology he's talking about. I'm not sure I accept this characterization of it, but if it was minority interest group structures, it would not be class structures. If instead of thinking of society as a class struggle, we think of it as a struggle between different minority interest groups, it is no longer Marxism, meaning not Marxism.
What is the primary aim of this? Among other things, it is a different interpretation of society, which is therefore intended to segregate and pull apart societies as you and I might understand them, so that people's primary affiliation is not that I'm an Australian, or I'm British, but I'm a member of the LGBT community in the Greater Sydney area.
Wait, how is national identity not like an identity group? Wait, so I'm a member of the LGBT community in the Sydney area? Why? Because it's more specific? What are we getting at?
For instance, you can predict with 100% accuracy the people who encourage this, the people who will...
We haven't said what we're talking about yet. I understand I'm watching a clip. Maybe there's greater context in this larger interview. Maybe I shouldn't be pulling clips, but we have not said what we are talking about exactly. I mean, we know the implication, right? The implication is people need to shut the fuck up about whatever minority group they're a part of that's oppressed, and instead, think of themselves only as, like, I guess, national citizens of, like, nationalities, maybe, but okay.
Grab the latest claim by an interest group and run with it. And it is always people who in the past had another way of trying to attack our societies.
What does that mean, in the past? The same people? Or the same type of people? Wait, what's the type of people? Is it LGBT people? Because that's the group you've mentioned.
Radical Marxist view of the world, for instance. We know this with the green issue, where, and again, like...
Wait, people, so the LGBT community who would have been the radical Marxists, and, well, let's hear about what this has to do with the green issue.
Like the rights issues I write about in this book, they succeed because they're not onto nothing, The green movement is onto something with the environment and with our planet. But it has this hideous red interior which keeps exposing itself as desiring not...
Look at this guy. Look how performatively intellectual he is. He's acting like he's pondering every word so carefully. I mean, maybe he is, but, like, he hasn't said... Like, this is a theme we're running into with all of these conservative interviews, where it is just one or two sentences airing a grievance about some particular part of, I don't like LGBT, green movement, the Marx, but there's no logic running through it. Am I pausing too much? Should I just let this go and see where this... Okay, I should just let this go.
Not a better relationship between ourselves and our environment, but, for instance, the end of capitalism.
Yeah.
And it's the same with this. I expose...
I mean, like... I'm sorry for continuing to pause it, but hyperproduction and endless growth of capitalism is contributing to, or at least makes it very, very difficult to deal with the impacts of climate change. There's like most of the green movement is not a Marxist, but whatever.
In each of the chapters, that the people who make it repeatedly and desperately plain that they believe, for instance, that being a woman should
We're totally off the green topic. I'm sorry.
be merely the first step in a wider mission to bring down capitalism. Now,
What?
I don't think most women are on board with that, and most women would be rather surprised to be utilized in this fashion. But that is very clearly and explicitly, and I quote the various scholars and writers who've been pushing this for years, this is explicitly the aim. And it's why, as I say, you can always predict exactly who is going to latch onto the latest claim. When, for instance, the big bearded man with male genitalia wins the women's weightlifting competition, you can predict with 100% accuracy who is going to say, yeah, what's the problem with that? And the people who are going to say, I'm not sure Clive, the big weightlifter, should be winning the women's category.
Okay, I'm pretty sure this is not... I don't want to get into the issue of trans people in sports. I'm not terribly read up on that. I'm pretty sure this is not something that is happening. Secondly, I'm pretty sure that this person has absolutely no intrinsic interest in women's weightlifting. Also, can I point out, we've completely jumped topic again?
Predicted. And the people who say, why have you got a problem with that, bigot, are always the same people who believe...
What does this same people thing mean? You can predict it? I feel like he's referring more to... I feel like he's talking more about his own reaction to the people than the people themselves. I think what he really means is whenever any of these kinds of things happen related to progressive issues, you know, trans rights, environmentalism, I always predictably get angry at this caricature of a left-leaning person in my head. I feel like that's what he means. I get so angry. So predictably, for, you know, even though there's no intrinsic connection between any of these things necessarily, other than that they are part of progressivism broadly, I always get so angry at the same imaginary person.
In the past, that our societies needed to be pulled apart in another fashion, and now they'd like to do it in this fashion.
So, this what might be called, I think accurately, cultural Marxism.
He was the former deputy prime minister. I'm sorry, I'll stop pausing.
Groan and say, oh, here we go again. Yeah. But in reality, it is the case, isn't it, that from the 20s on, Frankfurt School, and the 30s, you had Gramsci and so forth, saying there's a problem in the overthrow of capitalism. The working classes are not rising up.
Yes. They were always a letdown.
They're always a letdown. They haven't done the job for us. So we need to find a different way to achieve the same objectives, and it's to attack the cultural underpinnings of Western society. In particular, I would have thought things like capitalism itself, democracy.
It shouldn't need to be pointed out because these ideas can be criticized without it, but this is literally like a Nazi argument. This is literally just the Jews have infiltrated our culture and are trying to bring down, you know, white society. That's literally what this is.
But also Christianity and the churches and family. Mm-hmm. Family. So the great loser out of a lot of this, frankly, I would say these culture wars are our children.
Yeah.
You know, we've deconstructed the family in so many ways, and there's further attacks the environment in which our kids grow up.
Yeah.
I've never quite...
Are we talking about gay people being able to adopt? How is the family destroyed? What does any of this have to do with the Frankfurt School?
I quite understood how, though, the cultural Marxists managed to so capture academia in the West, and particularly, it seems to me, in the English-speaking countries.
Oh, well, that's easy. I mean, first of all, academics can be, I think, fairly characterized as not among the bravest people in the world.
What does that mean?
Once they get tenure, they become very comfortable in a position. They are, this isn't always the case, but they are to a considerable extent, as long as they tick the right boxes and have the right views, an unusual beast in nature and they have no predator. they are
look at this rhetoric. This is incredible.
able to have a very comfortable position in which they should express perhaps uncomfortable discoveries. But the comfort of recent decades has become the comfort of espousing and following a basically culturally Marxist view of the world.
There's no explanation yet for why professors would be cultural Marxists, other than, well, they can be because they're not going to be fired for it. No explanation for why it would go in any one particular direction. I mean, professors are generally leftists because leftism is typically the most logically and empirically supported worldview, I think. But I mean, so, people obviously with a sort of a curiosity for the world are going to gravitate towards it. I mean, that's an explanation I could give, but I want to hear what the professors have all gravitated towards cultural Marxism. I assume we're talking humanities and social sciences. I don't think there's a whole lot of Marxists in the economics department. I guess that's a social science, but
the literature, the evidence of this is so overwhelming now, particularly from America, it has to be said. And there are reasons within that why that's the case. I mean, look at the amount of money that people now run up to get an education in America. It's happening in the UK as well. But if you massively increase the number of people who go to university and think they should go to university, you can't keep up a system that rewards people for having gone to those universities. And you create a Ponzi scheme, which is what academia has to a great extent become, where social science departments grow and grow, where the human resources departments grow and grow. I can't remember the multiple now, but it's something like 3 or 4 times more money is now spent in the American academy on the purely bureaucratic elements of it than even 20 years ago.
That's probably true. That wouldn't surprise me. Still, we're off the topic of cultural Marxism, but okay.
Which means that young people in countries like America are running up massive debt in a Ponzi scheme that cannot reward them, because there aren't roles at the end of it for all of these people with the degrees they're given. I think, by the way, there's a massive amount of resentment coming in the next few years from the people who realize they've been had.
I think this is one of the great dangers, frankly, for Western society. I agree with you.
But to go back to the origins of why academics might be in this position, I mean, let me put it another way, and this is one that will make me enormously unpopular with some remaining friends in academia, but it's also the case that to a great extent this isn't where the bright people have gone in recent years. Tell me, outside of...
I kind of wonder who this is meant to, appeal to. I kind of wonder if it's, students or former students who are mad that they are hugely in debt for a degree that's not going to get them a great job right out of college, and are looking for someone to blame other than, something to blame other than, capitalism and university bureaucracy, and I was like, oh, it's the Marxist professors. I don't know.
Specific sciences and competencies. Tell me a situation where in the last 20 years we would say, this is a really big problem. Let's go to the universities and ask them for the answer. When in recent decades we've had massive issues, have we been saying, we must ask the professors what they think? No, we haven't, for all sorts of reasons, but one of them is they're not very good at giving us the answers anymore. And by the...
Well, no, it's probably because they're going to give you answers that would suggest we have to do things about certain systemic problems, right? Maybe related to oppression of certain minority groups, the environment, right?
You
don't like those answers.
The place you'd go last for an answer would be the gender studies department of a West Coast university.
Right, that's the last place you would go, because they would tell you information you don't want to hear. Yeah.
Let's go and see what they can tell us about the sexes. Oh, there aren't sexes. There's just 100 genders, including 2 spirit.
Well, wait. Okay, wait. So the number of genders is not necessarily dependent on the number of sexes. So sex is not a binary, right? It's there's clusters of traits that we group into 2 different sexes. But it's not like there are. It's not like there are for any one male person they have all the traits. They have all the necessary and sufficient traits to be male, and any given person we assign as female, they have all the necessary and sufficient traits to make them assign female. Gender is a more complicated thing, right? Where you could argue that there are two genders because well, if gender is socially constructed, then there are exactly as many genders as we have socially constructed. It seems to be two. Then there are people who don't identify with either gender. You could argue that's a third gender, or you could just say, well, they don't identify with either of the genders. But there are like plenty of people who are not don't identify with either gender. That's fine. I don't know about 100. Like I don't know how like for there to be 100 genders, like would there have to be like 100 socially constructed genders that are all recognized in society, or if you have like right two-spirit. I don't know enough about this to say whether it would be a gender or not. I know whatever. I mean, what is a gender at the end of the day? Again, nothing that he said is mutually exclusive with any of these positions, or rather, nothing that he said is the number of sexes is not mutually exclusive with the number of genders.
People we just invented yesterday. Oh, great, they're useful. This is a useful department. Thank goodness kids are getting into massive debt being lied to by these people.
Is this targeted at like former like gender studies majors? Like I'm pretty sure if they majored in gender studies, they're not going to be interested in what Douglas Murray has to say.
They've lost in large part the competence they had. And I think that there's all sorts of reasons for that. As I say, among other things, a massive expansion of that sector beyond where it should have gone.
Well, astonishing. And one of the reasons it matters now is that such a high proportion of young people in the West go through university.
Yeah.
We never did connect the hyperinflation of university costs and student debt with the cultural Marxism, did we? I do feel like we're just vaguely gesturing at both and hoping the students who are, angry about being in debt connect the dots. I'm not sure.
And then they filter out into teaching our children, into the media, into all sorts of influential places. Now the boardrooms, they've become centres of great wokeness.
Yes.
In our country.
Okay, so I'm pretty sure cultural Marxism does just mean progressivism, because we haven't connected Marxism to any of these things, really. I guess the idea is like, well, Marxism was the leftist idea of the time, and now there are new ideas, but like there are still people who are Marxists, and they all have conflicts with other ideas on the left. I don't know.
Yes, of course they have. I mean, it used to be said the only small c conservatives you would find in university were generally in the economics departments. They would also always have Marxists in the economics departments, but you'd often find that was where some conservatives were, because the economics still needed conservative thought. That's not the case so much anymore, and it's certainly not the case in the humanities. And the evidence and what studies have been done show just the overwhelming preponderance of Marxists, self-identifying socialists, and others. I've often said in recent years, and the only place you can really find open radical Marxists after the Cold War closes is in the university system. Although now we also have it in our...
Well, yeah, and you would have them stamped out even there, right? Because nothing short of total control is acceptable, right? If Marxism is so marginalized a position that it's retreated to the corners of academia, it must be squashed even there. I mean, like, let's reflect a little bit on the guy's like presentation and rhetoric too, right? It's very composed, very deliberate. He's reaching deep within himself for each idea. But this is like, is it ableist? Is it an ableist term for me to say that this is like all conservative interviews are like incredibly like schizophrenic? Like they're just like all over the place. It's everything in their head that's haunting them is tied to everything else, and it all has to be said all at once. So in this 10 minutes, we've gone from Marxism to environmentalism to gender studies to basically a bunch of different things that have nothing directly to do with one another, I guess, other than being something progressives care about, and it's all cultural Marxism. Nothing really has been explained. Again, I don't know if that's a fault of me watching just the clips.
Political system, so that's a development.
Okay.